Hello, India. We're gonna take a look at your first project from the class, the emotive squares that you've posted onto the blog. And to do that, we're going to screen share here, get these sort of worked together and share. All right. So here we are. This is your posting. And I see you've got everything in there, which first of all is a good job. Having your having everything included in the posting is actually an achievement. Following the instructions and making sure you're getting everything in that's supposed to be in, that's a good job. Now, when we're talking about the project, of course, we've mentioned that there are two parts to it. You have the construction part of it, where you are manipulating the squares and you're organizing them to achieve a certain relationship to the topic, tension or heavy, congestion, playful, and so on. And then you're doing a reductive exercise, which is to make photographs. And that is, in essence, to kind of show us your perspective of these compositions. Because we know that as we're looking at something, there are many ways to look at it. If I am looking at you straight on this way, and then perhaps turn this way, I'm changing my composition simply by rotating my own body. If I'm looking at something within a frame like this, and I shift my head this way, and I'm looking at it at a slightly different angle, and then I move this way in a slightly different angle, it's remarkable, if you've done that before, it's remarkable how different the composition can look, getting in closer and farther away. And so that's what the second part was all about. And so I can see you were managing the first part, and in many of your examples here, it's almost as if you're showing us the entire thing first, and then you kind of get in there a little bit. Part of the project is interpretation. I'm very much interested in how each of you interpret these projects. That's where your visual voice is going to come in. If we were to give you a hard example, achieve this look, and really all you were trying to do was maybe to reproduce that, then that wouldn't be a challenge, first of all, and second, we wouldn't be nurturing your own creativity. So the idea that they would kind of leave it open and say, we want you to do these things, here are some rough outlines into how you're going to do it, now have at it. We're looking at these, I'm looking at these through that lens, through, okay, how are they interpreting this? And at first, I'm looking at your tension, and it's kind of interesting to determine which one of these you've done first. In other words, did you do tension first? Did you organize playful, second? Are they in the order in which you stacked them here, or otherwise? Because oftentimes, as you're doing the project, you get better, or at least you get to a little bit more sophisticated with your solutions as you continue to go. Another reason to do multiples of anything. All right, so let's take a look at tension. Here, what you're setting up, I'm presuming, is this sort of hovering area right here. So tension is really about a relationship when we think about it. Tension is about an object and another object and the relationship of those objects. And I suppose the closer something gets, in terms of two objects, the more tension you could imagine that they have, right? The farther apart they get, the less tension that they have. So the interactions of these squares, what you've got here are these that are touching, and as soon as they touch, the tension is gone. It's sort of like as I'm coming towards something, and then when I finally hit it, the energy is released. And so when you have these objects here, they're touching, that dissolves the tension. And so those would be pacified. The object right in here, as we're looking at it, there's this energy between here and here, energy between here and here and here and here. And the question that I want you to ask yourself, is there enough energy there to qualify as tense? Right? That's what you're looking for. If the objective is to reflect this topic of tension, then the objects themselves, what can I do visually to create that energy? So that's the arrangement of the objects. And then you kind of start to switch things around. This gives me an indication that you're starting to look at, that you're starting to look at the whole picture frame. You've offset the objects. And so therefore the space here, this negative space, starts to play more of a role in the composition than does here. This again gets a little bit better. Now here's what I want to show you in terms of tension. You see this area right in here? This area, hopefully you can see the mouse on the video here. And then also right in here. Notice how this is coming to a point and creating a tension right there, right? It's because of all of the objects and all the interactions in the composition here. You've got a shape going on here. There's enough room that I can comfortably kind of visually sit in it. Here there's plenty of room. Here even there's an even space around the square. Not a lot of tension going, but over here, that's where the tension is starting to happen. Now the question is that where you want us to look? Is that where you want us to focus on? So what we're talking about is emphasis, and you've created a height of tension over there. And so you ask yourself, is that exactly where I want to look? So these are some of the questions that you want to ask yourself as you're putting these together, as you're designing the solutions to any of these projects. It's important that you're asking yourself, what am I observing? And is this exactly what I want to be going on? Now over here in tension, I think this gets actually a little bit off the topic. Let's talk about what this does, and we'll get back to it to some of the others, but here what we're doing is something called continuance. And continuance is the phenomenon where you set up a kind of arc or a line, you set up a specific kind of movement where the eye connects the dots in a way. And what's happening here is because you have created this sort of throughway of these objects, 1, 2, 3, I'm getting the idea that this is a line, that this is an arc. And an arc, a curve, is ease, right? That's going to give us an easy kind of pathway. A tension would be where two things are sort of right up on one another. Again, let's take a look at right here. Now, you may or may not have intended to even have this little line here, but that's creating tension. It's creating tension between this object and the edge of the board there. So all of these things, these are what sort of contributes to the idea of the composition being achieving what it is that you're trying to achieve. So let's move forward. I don't want to belabor every single point here. This is actually, I think, a better solution to your tension, because here you're creating these moments. Boom, this little moment here, these little jagged moments, this little moment right here. Notice how all of that now is in a centralized, or at least in a more local place within your composition rather than the side. I think this one's much better in terms of approaching and dealing with the concept of tension. This as well. Here what we're getting are these diagonals that are creating the energy amongst these two things, almost as if this little guy is keeping these two big squares away. Now, whether these areas here down below, this and this over here, are contributing, that's questionable. I think perhaps if we got rid of those, if visually I put my hands up on the composition and don't see those little sort of white triangles at the bottom, I think I'm getting a much better composition that way, because I don't know that those are participating very well right now in the composition. So let's move into some of your others. Playful. Now, what is playful? When we're dealing with these concepts, thinking about what is the nature of the topic that I'm looking at? Playful, what is that? Playful is a sort of maybe unexpected, perhaps an interaction that happens to be somewhat fun. that kind of thing. And so what we would think about, again, what would a kid look like if they are being playful? Would they be standing up rigid in a line, or would they be sort of like arced in a curve and going this way and going that way and sort of diving in this direction? Um, would they be smiling? Would they have this uplifted? Would the energy be up, or would it be down? I think it would be up in the air. And this is giving you, this composition here is giving you a little bit of that up feeling, but I'm not sure that they're quite, having as much fun as they might be able to be having. They're sort of crashing into each other just a little bit. This composition, on the other hand, is a little bit down, and so again, these topics, the first thing that you're challenged to do is to determine what's the nature of it. What would be the visual equivalent of the word playful? And that's what you're exploring here and hopefully getting at as you continue. Now, here, you're getting there, right? Here feels more. This is a very simple solution. We're not talking about, creating these sort of masterwork, crafted pieces. These are explorations, right? This is like calisthenics, exercises to get us thinking in the right way. However, what you have here is, like almost this circle, right? This sort of relationship that's happening between all the objects, which is giving us the continuance that I was talking about, how the eye sort of travels around in this direction like this. And so we get this sort of, maybe they're holding hands, or maybe there's a ring here. Maybe there's this sort of game that's happening and they're sitting around a circle, that kind of thing. So I think this gets much more at the heart of playful. Again, paying attention to little moments like this, little moments like this, as to whether they are truly playing a role in the composition or not. Lonely. Lonely is a comparative thing, right? We compare crowdedness to isolation. One could say you're never so lonely as being by yourself in a crowded room, right? When you're just yourself, that can be just isolation. That's actually a little bit more of a subtle thing. But lonely can be a whole nother thing altogether. So let's take a look at some of your solutions and whether we're getting there. This one's a bit more, right? This one I think is getting there because not only are we separating an element from the rest of the group, this element is even oriented slightly different than the other ones, right? It's not as if just this one is over there, but the same. It's over there and it is sort of positioned in a different way, straight up and down like that, as opposed to over here where they're all sort of at diagonals. Maybe those diagonals over there, they're all having a good time. That's why they're slightly diagonal. But this guy over here is just sort of standing there straight up and down. I think this one's a good one. The overall composition in this image isn't quite there yet. I mean, I think it's imbalanced a little bit, but we can continue to work on that as we go. You can see as you get a little bit closer there, the balance of the composition gets a little bit better, I think. But here you're getting that sense. This one is not just separated, but oriented differently, gives it that additional little bump to your topic. All right, let's take a look at a couple more here. Heavy. Now, heavy, it seems like it's an obvious one, right? It's a comparative thing where you're using a weight. I really do like what you're attempting to do here with what's happening, where you're combining all of these together to kind of give it this weight and that kind of thing, where you're creating this extra shape where out of the smaller shapes. I think this is a great idea, and I think there's a lot of possibility with this sort of concept, much more than something like this, which seems almost a little bit arbitrary, only because you got some gaps here and some gaps here, and these spaces aren't exactly touching and that kind of thing. I think your solution where you have the entire object running together works very well. All right, let's take a look at your last one here, congestion, which is a little bit of a challenge. I would say that congestion's a tough one because what is that, congestion? It means that you're sort of funneling a bunch of things through some tight kind of space. It's a feeling, right? And so I think what you're doing here with the slight angle, it's like you've got this composition here, and yet the horizontal nature of them, I think, kind of relieves some of that energy that you're looking for. Whereas here with the diagonal, you're getting a little bit more energy in terms of that. I appreciate what you're doing here, where you're setting up these barriers and trying to box them in. And maybe if you had approached that here in some way, maybe had some of the squares kind of cutting off here and cutting off here or something like that. I don't know if it's absolutely necessary. I think this is an effective sort of solution to what you're doing. And it tends to work pretty well in terms of the congestion. You've got all these relationships setting up here where they're touching, but you're getting these diagonals. These triangles, they create that sort of energy that you're going for. Almost think of them almost like little lightning strikes within the composition. Now, normally I kind of go through some of the student comments. Let's see, India got some. They really like some of your designs. Really cool. So what I want to do is kind of have you looking at the postings, which you clearly have done. You've done your response there to both of them, but really kind of take that and think about how are they seeing what they're seeing. Take the comments that I am offering you right now and go back into those pieces and kind of look at them and go, what's he talking about? Whether you agree with what I'm saying or not. You may be like, well, I actually think this one's a good example, even though Alexander maybe thought it wasn't a great example. It's not about whether my thoughts are the right direction or your thoughts are the right direction or somebody else's in the classrooms is the right direction. What you as the artist want to do is consider, how did that person get there, right? Try to figure out how they're perceiving that, not whether they're right or wrong. They're being honest, right? They're giving an honest sort of feedback to you. So the question isn't yes or no, it's really how do they get there? So those are the kinds of things you want to ask. So that's it. That's what I wanted to sort of talk to you about when it comes to your posting. We'll get more of these with other projects that you do. I appreciate your work on that. You got it all in. And I will, of course, you'll get an actual letter grade, a handout that has a letter grade and all of that on there. But I wanted to give you this feedback, and I think you've done a nice job for this first project. You're going to be amazed at how far you go from here, though. You're going to just keep going forward with what you learned from this all through the semester. So. All right, we will talk later. We'll see how you're doing on your next project, and we'll see you in class. Bye-bye now.